Today's episode is sponsored by Worm Return, using food scraps to create landscapes, not landfills. Hi everybody, how you doing? What's new? I've been hanging in there, just contemplating the world, maybe a little bit too much lately. There's a story I heard about the cultural anthropologist Margaret Mead, and it could be a myth, but apparently she had a student ask her what she considered to be the first sign of civilization. And you think maybe a tool or some sort of process that moved humans forward, but she said the first sign of civilization was a healed bone, a thigh bone. The logic is that if you're alone and you break your leg, you break a significant bone like that, you die. You can't defend yourself from bear, you can't get water, you can't forage for food. Most animals in the wild that break significant bones don't live long enough for them to heal. So a broken femur that's healed shows that someone else was there and cared for them, made sure they were safe, and fed and watered them until they could take care of themselves again. That's where civilization started. That was civilized. That's community. Community is so important. You can prep and stock up on things and hoard your money, but when it comes down to actual shit going down, what's going to save you is having a community that you can trust. And I'm really grateful to my community here in Pittsburgh and the support for my podcast. And I'm really grateful to everybody who reached out to support this podcast. Thanks so much. And I'm super grateful to everyone who pitched in to cover the fee for a marketing and sponsorship workshop I did last year. Thank you so much. I sincerely appreciate my community, and I could not survive without you. Today, you're going to hear my conversation with Teaira Collins from Lion of Judah Enterprises. Teaira talks about the complications of navigating unique parenting challenges, especially with food, with a child with Down syndrome. Teaira is an amazing woman, and I'm glad you all get to know her, too. Enjoy our talk. Welcome to With Bowl and Spoon. I am here today with my guest, Teaira Collins.
Hi, how are you, Michelle? I appreciate doing this with you and for me. So I am Teaira Collins. I am the ED of Lion of Judah Enterprises, which is a nonprofit for people of color with Down syndrome. And I also sit on several boards for the city of Pittsburgh. One board will be the Pittsburgh Food Policy Council. We're doing our interview today to talk about healthy foods, why it's important to eat healthy, and what that may look like for different people. Yeah. And with my nonprofit, the goal is to teach our children who are normally overweight, because they normally do not eat a healthy diet or follow a healthy diet, how to eat healthy and properly, and why it's important by teaching the parents that.
So your son, Judah.
Yes.
When was he born?
Judah was born May 18th, 2012, and diagnosed at birth with Down syndrome.
Did you have any experience with Down syndrome in your life?
I did have some experience with it because I'm a home health aide. I dealt with teenagers and adults who had Down syndrome in my evening position. So that was the extent of dealing with it. But dealing with it personally, one-on-one, that was my first encounter.
And how was that different from your job as a home health aide?
It's different because
besides the obvious.
That's a really good question. It's really a good question because it is different because it's someone that you actually have to care for 24 hours a day. There's no start time, there's no end time. So that's what makes it different. When you go to work, there's a start time and an end time. So you only have to care for that person for that amount of hours. And when you're done, you get to go home. But with Judah, there was no start time or no end time. Start time was whatever time we started, and there was an end time was when he went to bed, and that was 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So that's how it's different. We were introduced to the Down Syndrome Clinic of Pittsburgh, and then the Down Syndrome, which is called DSAP, the Down Syndrome of Pittsburgh, which were both supposed to be places that I could go to get help and support as a mom, a new mom with a child of color with Down syndrome. What I got to find out was that wasn't the place for me. I appreciate everything they've done. I still deal with both. We still go to the clinic, but the supports that I needed as a mom of color with a child of color with Down syndrome was not what I got, and it wasn't what I needed. I was really just like fumbling around, figuring things out on my own, and with already being a mom of 4 children, which is what the guidance that I used. It was hard at first because I had to deal with an acceptance of the fact that I had a child that had Down syndrome and what to do next, because most kids with Down syndrome are born with a lot of health problems. So it was more or less just trying to figure out what to do next. And once we started figuring things out, we got help, we got supports. 5 days a week, someone would come into my house. We started out with PT, OT, speech, behavior, and on Friday, a therapist would actually come and sit down with me and talk to me and, let me get my feelings out of how I felt and what was going on. I knew from being at work and working with children with Down syndrome that Judah would have a major problem with his weight, or at least I thought. I knew watching the children, they had teenagers and adults that ate whatever they want, and didn't know when they were full and didn't stop and overate and ate obsessively, that was something that I was going to want to get a handle on from the start with Judah. And even as a baby, which is crazy, they didn't know when to stop eating. So I taught Judah sign language. That was the first thing, was teaching him sign language so we could communicate, because they said he wouldn't walk or talk until he was like 4 or 5, and that wasn't okay with me. So his favorite words was eat, more, and please.
Aww. At least he was polite.
Yeah,
Did
we
he
taught
thank you too?
And he did thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, we taught him eat, more, and please, and thank you. And those was his favorite words.
Nice.
We would feed him, and as you were feeding him, it was always eat more and please, and after you gave him was thank you. So I love telling that story because those were his favorite words. And even now, he's 12, but my kids still talk about that. They get a kick out of it because they know if you ask them, they'll tell you those was his favorite words. And I would have to stop him. Like when we would feed him his baby food, he would get his bowl of cereal and he would get his applesauce, and we fed him. He got to eat early. Like most doctors tell you, don't feed him until they're 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, or whatever. Judah was hungry. We fed him. I think he was probably like 2 months old. We started feeding him just some rice cereal, and we got pictures of him with his face covered in rice cereal. So I was just looking at him the other day, us feeding him his bowl of cereal, and it would be like when you were done, he would be looking at you like, I'm not done. But meanwhile, he done burped and everything, so you know he's full. For me, it was like, wow, this baby's only a couple months old, and he still, even then, wouldn't stop. Like they just don't know. It's like, I don't know if it's like part of it doesn't recognize.
It doesn't
register. Right, exactly. It doesn't register with them that I'm full. And they would eat. And the crazy part, when you like a baby, when you overfeed them, what does a baby do when you overfeed them?
It comes out.
Yes,
right?
and it would projectile. It would be like, and it was like, okay, and that was something that I had to learn. Like I knew from my other kids, but even for him, he was a preemie, so he ate less. So it took less to fill up his little stomach.
Aww.
So those were things we had to learn. As he got older, when he started eating solid foods on table foods, 7, 8 months old, we started feeding him things. I would have to remind my kids, because they loved feeding him. He had 4 siblings, and then my nephew lived with me. So there was 5 kids in there, teenagers and adults, that was like loving this baby and feeding this baby. And it was like, and he knew I could just go to any of them and they're going to feed me whatever they got. He knew it, and that's what he would do. And I would tell him, like, y'all got to stop. You can't do that. He's full. I just fed him. The older he got, I think the funnest part for me was when he became a toddler. And you can go into the grocery store, and he had a shopping cart. And I would go live with him, and I would go through and we would shop. And because he was used to eating certain things, we would go through, we ate fresh broccoli, and we would go through, and that was ways of teaching him to talk. So it was kind of cool because I was saying what it was, and he knew what it was, and he would point to it. And he would like, want to go get it, and I would tell him, go get it and put it in your cart. And he would put it in his cart. So we would, and because
that must have been adorable to watch.
Right, Greenfield John Eagles, cool. The Greenfield John Eagles, they love him. If you go in there right now, everybody there knows Judah, and they watched him grow up. Aww. So to go in there, and even now when I walk in, they're like, "Where's Judah?" And they'll come in, and they're like, "You can leave," So it's kind of cool, and just those memories, being able to teach them something that I knew. Eating healthy was something that I learned. But I learned it as a child growing up with my grandma. So I learned it was important to eat healthy. I learned it was important to eat healthy so you weren't overweight, so you didn't have health problems. To watch how much you ate. Like, that was important to me. So I grew up eating healthy and exercising and working out. And all of my kids are like that because that's the way I grew up. So
then you had this kid who didn't have any concept of being done eating, no way to recognize that he was full. So then you had to pivot and figure out around that.
Right.
Interesting.
Right. Yeah. The interesting part was just like you had to figure that out because there was nothing to tell you that he was full.
There's no gauge.
No, there's no right. You don't have no gas gauge. You don't get to get an empty or a full or a quarter tank. Quarter full, exactly. Like you're great. You're right. I love it. There's no gauge. You can't stick the little prong in them and say it's done. Like you do the chicken or the turkey. There's no thermometer. So yeah. So like I think that was my biggest challenge. But I think like for me, like I said, it wasn't even about figuring it out because being a mom and after you've been a mom for that long of a time and you have a child, I don't care what's wrong with them, and it's just getting everybody on the same page. That is so important. Everybody in your household, any household you go into, being on the same page. And for me, I worked. So he was always at my sister's house or somewhere with his dad, where I worked. And he never went to daycare. So it was always like, did Judah eat? Like if I dropped him off in the morning, if I was working the morning shift, the evening shift, or the night shift, it was always, this is what Judah ate. You always had to let them know, this is what Judah ate. This is when Judah eats again. But they knew. So I think like the biggest thing was making sure that we were all on the same page. That circle, there was no broken links. Because if there was one broken link, that's when everything would go to hell. And I would say projectile vomit, the kid would projectile vomit.
Oh. That's terrible. Yeah. That's not where you want to be.
No. Oh, but not only that, though, you don't want to be there because that's teaching them bad habits. You're teaching them overeating is okay and it's not. And he's 12 years old and he still does it. I got to tell him no.
Well, isn't that the age, I think, where kids start to like binge on chips and that sort of thing?
Right.
So
well,
teenagers.
Yes. But even like yesterday, he came in the kitchen and it was like, so he said, what's for dinner? I said, what do you want? And guess what he picked for dinner? Chicken and rice. I said, chicken and rice? I made steak the day before. And I said, you don't want the steak and broccoli? He said, no, Mom, I'm good. I want chicken and rice. So I already had the chicken out because I was cooking chicken anyways. And I baked it. I made baked chicken and rice with cream and mushroom soup. And I took the chicken breast when it was done, cut it in half. I didn't give him a whole chicken breast. I cut it in half. Gave him half that big old chicken breast with some rice. And that's what he had for dinner,
And he was happy.
He was happy.
Excellent.
But you have to teach them. And that's any child you have to teach. But a child with Down syndrome or any intellectual disability, it's different because they don't know. I would like to say, it's just kids with Down syndrome. All kids don't know. No kid knows when they're full.
You have other kids.
I have other kids.
You have, how many other kids did you say?
4 other kids. So there's
okay.
a total of 5 kids. And I've had to watch diets. That's my second child who I had to watch diets with. Because I have an older child who had to have a strict diet because of her being born with a rare kidney disease. Like most people, you got kids and you can just cook whatever you want. For me, it's never been like that. I've always had to pay attention and watch how I'm cooking, what I'm cooking, and how I'm feeding my kids.
Yeah, I was going to say, so you've done the passing on the knowledge of nutrition and portion control and all that to 4 other kids, but you were already thrown a pivot there then with Judah. Yeah. Another pivot.
A bigger pivot.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah, it was a bigger pivot. It was a pivot I wasn't expecting.
Yeah.
Well,
it's really fortunate that you had that knowledge base.
Right.
I want to talk about your organization, but first I want to talk about where your knowledge base came from. Where'd you grow up?
Where I grew up, Pittsburgh, a little bit everywhere. But my grandmother raised me, and my grandmother taught me at a young age. We had a garden in the back. I don't care where we lived at, we always had a garden in the back with fresh greens and tomatoes and different vegetables. And we was always cooking. I came from a big family. My grandmother had 10 girls and 6 boys alive. She had 18 total. My grandma had 18 kids total.
I can't even imagine that many.
When I was born, there were 16 living. So she said twins, and I guess they died. But coming from a big family, you're always cooking. You're always in the kitchen. And living with my grandma was fun because my grandma would cook for every holiday. So every holiday, everyone came to grandma's house. So every holiday, I would be in the kitchen with her, and I learned how to cut clean greens. I learned how to cook them. I learned how to clean turkeys, and I learned how to cook them. And you just cut tomatoes and green peppers and onions, but it was always healthy. You know what I mean? We had salad for every meal. So lunch and dinner, we always had a salad with every meal. You know, she made fresh homemade rolls from scratch. So she wasn't going to the store and buying bread. My grandma would get her some flour and some yeast, and she was kneading her dough and making it.
Wow. Yeah.
And taking those to the cup and making her biscuits and making biscuits for breakfast. So growing up with her was fun because I was taught then how to make a garden and eat fresh and healthy. And the crazy part is, at a young age, she explained the difference of why you wanted to have a garden versus going to buy a can of vegetables. She explained that. People don't explain those things to kids because they don't think kids get that concept. And I think people think of kids as like, oh, they're kids and they're here to help do whatever. Kids are actually smarter than most people, and they want to learn. And if you teach them, they take that knowledge with them forever. And for me learning at a young age helped me by having my kids. I would have never known that I was going to have to figure out how to feed a child who was born with a disease where she needed a kidney transplant. And her eating healthy played a big part of her life. Like, she couldn't have salt. She couldn't have pork. So when I would go out to buy food, I had to really pay attention to what I was buying, how I was buying, what was in it, because it could possibly, she had high blood pressure. 2 years old, the child had high blood pressure. At 2 years old, she was taking pills for high blood pressure. And I had to prepare. I never owned a microwave. My kids never got TV dinners. And because of my grandmother, I was able to feed my child properly in the things that she needed. I know, like in school, they had home ec for certain schools, so every school taught something different. I feel like that's something that you should learn. If you're not learning it at home, there should be somewhere in the community that you can go to learn those things. And that's something like for my nonprofit that I want to do. I want to offer cooking classes to my kids with Down syndrome and their parents because it's important. But the nice part is when I do it, like, I include the whole family. It doesn't make a difference if your child has Down syndrome or not. I want to be able to have cooking classes and teach our kids the responsibility and the importance of growing fruits and vegetables and eating healthy. They need to know these things. And I don't care what age they are. I think the younger they are, the better. You know how I got my kids to go outside and plant vegetables in my yard? I told them, I said, let's go play in the dirt. And my kids said to me, Mom, what is playing in the dirt? And I said, we're going to go get some dirt, some pots, so any vegetables, flowers you want, and plant them. I said, we're going to grow fruits and vegetables and plants. I said, and the crazy part is the fruits and vegetables, you can actually, when they're done growing, rinse them off and eat them. My kids were down with that because it wasn't work.
Yeah.
If you make it work, kids don't want to do it. And that's how I got them.
Hey Pittsburgh, want to reduce your carbon footprint but don't have the space to compost? Meet Worm Return, your neighborhood, female-owned, socially responsible composting service. Worm Return provides the containers, picks up your food scraps on your schedule, and turns them into nutrient-rich soil amendments. Plus, get personalized consultations and reports on your environmental impact. Join the movement to keep food scraps out of landfills. Call Worm Return today and start composting the easy way. Sign up today at wormreturn.com. Worm Return, turning food waste into garden gold. You started to make the segue into your nonprofit, Lion of Judah Enterprises. So why don't you talk a little bit about that? Why did you feel the need to start a nonprofit?
Because of Judah and him being black or brown and no one being able to tell me and guide me on what to do with him and how to do it with him. Like I said, but teaching him to talk. When he was born and I went to my first appointment at the Down syndrome clinic, everybody in there had either a child with Down syndrome, a sibling, a cousin, or a brother or a sister. They were all in there because they had some affiliation with Down syndrome. But to know that they had no idea how to guide you on how to teach your child to do things, they were more so like, whenever they do it, they'll do it. He's not going to walk or talk till he's 4 or 5. And I looked at him like, what the hell are you talking about? Who walks at 4 and 5? And I'm thinking, because I already got 4 kids at home. So it wasn't like I was a new mom. I was new to a baby with Down syndrome. But you telling me my child ain't going to walk till he's 4 or 5. And I'm sitting there looking at this man like, what the hell are you smoking? I got kids at home who they said wasn't going to live 24 hours. And she walked at 3. 4 or 5, I don't think so. And then you tell me that he's not going to talk. And I'm like, but there's things you can do to help them talk. We raise our children different from people, any other race. period. Our kids are raised completely different. Or the way that we raise our kids, the way that we treat our kids are completely different than the way anybody else raises their kids or treat them. Because when a child is born, you can take two children with the same exact thing who are at the same exact standard. We are more disciplinary with our children because our kids are looked at a certain way, no matter what. No matter what's wrong with them, they're looked at a certain way. So when I go out with my children, I don't want nobody looking at my children as being disrespectful or no home training. So they were raised a certain way. They were raised to talk a certain way. From the time that they were start walking and talking, they were taught to say yes ma'am, no ma'am. Yeah. Everybody doesn't do that.
I get your point that black folks, brown folks are viewed a lot more critically when it comes to the behavior of their children, judged on that. Yeah.
So,
no, I understand.
Right. See what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So they're raised differently. So my daughter, who's 27, she walked at 8 months old.
So you didn't think, why should it be any different
for
your
him.
Kid with Down syndrome?
Right. Him, that's just the label. I don't care that you have Down syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with your brain. Only different, your brain moves slower than someone who doesn't have Down syndrome. It takes more time to teach you something than someone who doesn't have Down syndrome. So if there's a way to teach them, figure it out. Don't just let it be like, oh, well, whenever it happens, it happens. And that's more or less how they were at the Down syndrome. They were more like real laxy-daisy with whenever it happens, it happens. And then so I started asking them questions like, well, do you have a child with Down syndrome? And like there's one doctor who doesn't have a child with Down syndrome, but his brother does. And when I asked, well, when did he walk or when did he talk? He told me 4 or 5 because they pretty much just let it happen when it happened. For me, it wasn't okay.
Because then that puts him at a disadvantage.
Right. He was born with a disadvantage. Yeah. Why make it harder?
Yeah.
The goal was to figure out how to make it easier.
Yeah.
See what I'm saying?
Uh-huh.
And so for me, it was like, okay, it's going to take more work for him to learn to do something. For me, it was like, how do I get him to do that? That's what you were supposed to teach me or show me or tell me. Well, this is what we did. And this is what I think we could do. Or this is what you could do. No one could tell me that. Because everyone was like, oh, my child walked at this age. My child walked at this age. They talked at this age. Hell, there was kids in the Down syndrome clinic that are 6, 7 years old wearing diapers. And I'm like, there's stages. So with Down syndrome, you have kids who function at different levels. Just like with autism, kids function at different levels. And Judah was at a high level function. For them, when he was born, it was called a Mount case because they can look at him and tell. Because when you look at the kids, you can tell that they have Down syndrome. Mm-hmm. You can't really look at Judah and tell he has Down syndrome. So he had a Mount case of Down syndrome. Well, that means we're going to go home and teach this kid everything we can. Kids are sponges.
Yeah.
If you teach them, they'll learn. But so for me, it was like, how can I teach this kid to talk? How can I teach this kid to walk? If he's not going to physically be able to talk to me until a certain age, you have sign language. There's always forms of talking. And so when I did that, it was crazy because I'm like, I go home, and by then he's like maybe 10 months old. And another thing, kids with Down syndrome are very strong. So when we tried to communicate with me because he couldn't, and we didn't know what he wanted, he would get aggressive. Well, a 10-month-old hitting you shouldn't hurt, but a 10-month-old with Down syndrome is like a 10-year-old punching on you because they're strong.
Really?
Strong as
wow.
An ox. Strong as an ox. So
that is wild. I had no idea.
Yeah, that's one of their strips. They're very strong. Just imagine how a kid put you and they wrap their arms around your neck from the back,
yeah.
And you can get out. If he he can't.
Stuck.
You can't. You're literally.
So you have to teach him to be gentle.
Yes.
Yeah.
Man, I teach him a lot.
Yeah.
I teach him
wow.
not nice, not nice. So, and Judah might have been a little bit younger than 10 months old. And I told my kids, that's a family meeting. I said, we have to teach Judah to talk. I said, so I'm going to teach him sign language. And my daughter at the time was in high school, Kiki. She was the youngest daughter. She ran up the steps and came back down and said, I got flashcards for sign language.
Oh, awesome.
So they was all in. And they was like, I said, we have to teach him to communicate. I said, since they say he's not going to talk, because I would talk to him every day. Like I talked to my other kids. When they were baby, like, what's up, baby? Hi. You did your normal baby talk, hoping that mama or dada or something would come out of his mouth. And it wasn't. So it was like, how do you get this baby to talk? And me, I said, sign language. I said, this baby's a sponge. We can teach him anything we want. I said, hell, we can teach him another language right now and he'll learn it. So they was like, okay. I said, but we have to do it as a family. I said, because we all have to be able to communicate with him. I said, now I know the basics because I learned sign language from going to school growing up. I'm legally blind in my left eye. So I grew up going to school with people who are deaf and blind. So I learned sign language and Braille. So for me, most people would have never thought sign language. So when I sat down with the speech person who was coming to my house, and I said to her, I would like to teach you the sign language. And they were all from Tice. And she said, oh my God, I think that would be cool. And I said, would they be willing to help me get somebody to come in and teach them? And she was like, I don't think they will. And I said, well, I'll teach them myself. Big TV in my living room. I said, we go to signlanguage.com and learn sign language. Yeah. That's what I did. But I also had to explain to my whole family, you guys are going to have to learn sign language with us.
To reinforce it and continually use it. Yeah.
I said, you're going to have to learn the basics. You don't got to learn a lot to be able to communicate with him. Because when you do sign language, the first thing you do, sign language, you automatically talk. Stop. Thank you. More. Please. Eat. Mm-hmm. So when you're teaching it to him, you're saying what it means. Mm-hmm. So we started teaching those. We taught Jew, and I would look at him and I would tell him, I'd be like, look, Jewbug, we called him Jewbug. His nickname was Jewbug. And I would talk to him and I would tell him, I said, we're going to learn sign language. And I taught him mom and I taught him dad. This is mom, this is dad. And every day I say, dad, point to his dad, mom. I taught him brother, sister, and nene. We taught him eat, more, please, thank you. And everybody did it. So what we did was we kept track. Every word that he learned, I would actually write it down. That once he was proficient with it, and he would come over and tap you, and he would tell you eat. And we would get a kick out of it. Right. And they'd be like, Mom, Judah's hungry. And even with potty training, we taught them, what the words for potty was. We taught them what the words for pee-pee was, what the words for poop was. Mm. We got them a potty chair. It was time to potty train because it
took a lot of work.
It did, but it was a group effort. It wasn't like I can't say, oh, I did this by myself. What I like here's the best part that I like. Tice is the program, and they're still around. They go, when you have a child with intellectual disabilities, they send Tice into your house. You get PT, OT, speech behavior therapist. His occupational therapist had a child with Down syndrome. And even her, I love Miss Lori. Me and Miss Lori are still friends. I'm friends with all of them still. Like, I'm friends with every single one of his therapists. His OT speech, we're still friends. She had a child with Down syndrome at the time. And at the time, her son was like 15. Even her, when I asked her about it, and I talked to her. It's nice to talk to someone who can say, my child didn't walk or talk until he was 4 or 5. My child wasn't potty trained until they were like 4, 5, or 6. And I'm looking at these people. I love Miss Lori. For you to tell me that your kid was wearing diapers past the age of 3, didn't make sense to me. Especially when I had a daughter who was given 24 hours to live, who was born with a rare kidney disease. So from the day that she was born, it was going to be an issue with her kidneys, who I was able to potty train before she was 3. I don't care that he has Down syndrome. I didn't already beat it the odds once. So my goal was to beat the odds and show the world that that's not true.
So how did the organization come about?
Mainly it was Facebook. Because every day I would record him. I don't care what we did, we would go live. And people just started following.
You still do that, don't you?
Yeah, we still do it. We do it live every morning. People started following me with Judah. Because for me, having another child with intellectual disabilities was, number one, it was a lot. I didn't understand why I had a kid with Down syndrome. Because it was like, when you talk about Down syndrome, it was like you had to fit in a criteria with Down syndrome. It was an age. It was what you did. For me, it was weird because I didn't fit in those criteria. But I had a baby with Down syndrome. But everybody was following me, and people were asking. It was people under with kids with Down syndrome who would say, how did you get him to do that? And I was like, do what? And they was like, he's potty trained. And I'm like, we potty trained though. I knew for a fact he was under 3. And they was like, you got him telling you he got to go potty. And I said, well, first of all, we got a party that sings. So we had to sing a party. So in order for you to get any praise, and we showed him, like, we would pour water in it. And we, like, the first time I got the potty chair, we poured water in it and started playing music. And we started jumping up around looking stupid and acting crazy and shit. And he's looking at us. So I explained to him, got a pee-pee for it to make noise. Now, we took the water out and dried it. And he looked. And he picked up the cup. That's how I knew he was smart right then and there.
He was going to fill the cup with water. He picked up the
cup and poured the water in it. And I was like, nope, no praise. That's not how this works. And I said, we got to sit on there and you got to pee-pee. But the crazy part is when he realized it and he finally did it and he came and got us and we looked and seen it was pee, I got to acting all stupid, jumping up and down. I started singing, pee-pee in the party, pee-pee in the party, pee-pee in the party, yay, pee-pee. And we all did it, the whole household, all the siblings, everybody. We all did it. The one thing I learned about kids with Down syndrome is they love music. But we love music. And I knew he was going to love music because his father's Jamaican, so music's in his blood. Then we got a musical family. Music's in his blood. I taught him to spell his name. Guess how I taught him to spell his name? Judah. 5 letters. Bingo. There is a kid, he was cute as a button, and Judah is his name. J-U-D-A-H. 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 And Judah is his name. That's how I taught him to spell his name. You just have to think outside the box.
Yeah.
So because of people asking me how I did that, the Lion of Judah was hatched. Because it was like, okay, let's create a nonprofit for people of color with Down syndrome to help them navigate this system. Because I've already navigated it. I've already figured it out. So since I already figured it out and I know that it works, let's help others so they're not stumbling along the way trying to figure out how to make this work. That was a lot for me. Especially a mom who had 4 kids who worked, trying to figure out how to navigate the system for a kid who had something that already exists for other kids. And there was a system out here, but it wasn't working because people didn't know how to navigate it themselves. Their thing was, whenever it happens, just let it go. That's not how a mom of color works. A mom of color wants answers. She wants to figure out how to fix it. Because we have to make our life as easy as possible because it's not easy. So I can't have a life out here trying to fumble and figure out how to do something because my life is already hard and that's making it harder. His life is already hard and the goal is to make his life easier. He already has challenges. So if I can make his challenges a little bit easier, why not? So now, if I can help somebody navigate that system and make their life easier because I've already figured it out. I haven't figured it all out because right now I'm dealing with puberty and it's kicking my ass.
Oh, boy.
But I'm happy because that's what he makes me happy. He's made me look at the world different. I've always been who I am. I've always been a person who wants to help somebody because that's the way my grandmother raised me. She raised me to help others. She raised me to feed others. If someone's hungry, feed them. If they need clothing, clothe them. That is who I am.
You're always positive and you're always looking at the bright side. I don't think I've ever seen you down.
Life's too short to be bent down. Look, I'm going to tell you, when I had Judah, I looked up. I said, was this a joke? I said, you got jokes, right, God? I did. Because it wasn't that he had Down syndrome. I didn't care that he had Down syndrome. And I think that's the hardest part for people to understand. Like when I say stuff about like Judah having Down syndrome and they're like, I said, I wasn't mad. Because what the problem with him having Down syndrome for me was I already had a child who was sick. And by the time Judah was born, the child I had that was sick was 18. Because him and my daughter is 18 years apart. I have a 35-year-old, a 30, a 27, a 21, and a 12-year-old. Someone said, what was you smoking? I look at life so much different than most people. I had that first kid, and I was a teen mom for the first kid. I was able to spend time with him to be able to get to know him. So when you have another child, there's no time. I have my 30-year-old who was born sick. And I'm glad that they were that's far apart because she came December 22nd, right before Christmas. So they kind of messed up his Christmas. She wasn't even due till February. With her being born sick, I worked in a hospital because I worked at Presby when she was born. And then Children's Hospital was right next to it. I spun my 8 hours in the morning at Presby, and then when she would be sick, go right across the bridge and spend my 8 hours at night in the hospital because she was sick.
Aww.
And she was always sick. So when I had Judah, that's what's the thing. Oh my God, here we go, another baby. I'm going to have to spend my life in the hospital with. But he wasn't sick. But he made me look at the world different because he got the heart of gold.
Aww.
The Sour Patch, because they're Sour Patches. Kids with Down syndrome are the biggest Sour Patches in the world. But he looks at the world. He doesn't see black and white. All he sees is good and bad. So he can read your heart. He can see your soul. Judah will come outside with a pizza and go feed you because he knows you're homeless. We went down the street one day downtown, and a homeless guy was sitting there. He said, "What's up, man?" And Judah said, "What's up?" and gave him a hug. And the guy said, "I wouldn't let him hug him." And I said, "Why not?" He said, he's homeless. I said, man, he got Down syndrome. I said, do you know that this is the biggest blessing God could have ever given me? I said, he don't care that man's homeless. I said, he's looking at that man's heart. I said, and apparently that man got a good heart because he wouldn't have gave him a hug.
Yeah.
He said, for real? I said, no, he wouldn't have. So I watched Judah, and I go off his energy.
Yeah.
Judah made me look at people differently. To see my baby feed somebody and to give them a hug,
Yeah.
you can't buy that. They don't look at life the way we do. So doing the line of Judah and helping others, I'm that person, but he made me that person 100 times more. And I love it.
So how can people find your organization?
So Line of Judah Enterprise right now is huddling in the Hill District. My phone number is 412-654-5359 or 412-853-5235. I am on Facebook. I am Teaira, Teaira, Keilah, Collins. On Facebook, I had to think because I changed it. You can actually go on Facebook and find the Line of Judah Enterprises. You can actually find Judah and send him a friend request. He has a Facebook page.
Oh, excellent.
Yes. We are on Instagram, Living in Junebug's World. He has YouTube. My email address is lionofjudahenterprises@gmail.com. We're outside. We do live videos every morning. When I take him on vacation, we do live videos.
You went to Dubai.
Yes, that was Judah's birthday gift. That was his decision. I love traveling. He likes to travel. I had to change my thinking with him. So our logo, Living in Junebug's World, came from me changing the way I thought and the way I raised him. Because you raise your kids a certain way, but I couldn't raise him the way I raised the rest of my kids because it wasn't the same. He wasn't like the rest of them. He was different, and he didn't work the way that they worked. So I had to start living in his world to get him to do what I needed him to do because I had to follow him. Because following him, he showed me stuff that I would have never seen on my own. And that's how we ended up in Dubai. Because I said, what do you want to do for your birthday? Dubai has a very nice water park. And he wanted to go to the water park in Dubai.
Oh my gosh.
So he said, I want to go to Dubai for my birthday. His birthday's in May. And we went to Dubai in June.
That is really beautiful. And I'm glad that you are living in Junebug's world and sharing it with all of us.
Yeah, thank you. I love it. And listen, if I don't share it with you, you ain't going to know how fun and exciting it is.
Yep. Teaira, thank you so much for being on my podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate you.
Everyone knows that food is cool. No secret. Eat that food with a bowl and spoon. Everyone knows that food is cool. No secret. Eat that food with a bowl and spoon. Bowl.
With Bowl and Spoon is written, produced and hosted by Shelley Dankler.
And spoon.
Original theme song was written and performed by Paul LeBreeze and friends. You can listen to With Bowl and Spoon wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to subscribe, like, review and share. Follow us and send questions or messages on Facebook and Instagram at With Bowl and Spoon. Thanks for listening.